Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. I'm Stu Hardy, joined as always by Derek Brissett. Derek, we have just had our first round of Eliminators. And, there's been other rugby going on. There's, these small competitions in England and South Africa and so on and so forth that have their semi-finals, completely unimportant things.
I was going to say, definitely no rugby being played in Wales, Scotland, and Ireland right now, eh?
Well, hang on. Wasn't one of the games? And anyway,
were they there? I don't know.
Well, definitely not.
All I know is
definitely not this weekend.
I was going to say, all I know is apparently South Africa is the best team in Europe right now. It's the South Africans. Team. Yeah. Bit of a crazy weekend for rugby and stuff. It's kind of fascinating to see the Saracens return to the final in their first year back in the Premiership so quickly after. It's crazy. You never see a team gain promotion from the lower divisions and then just go straight to the Premiership final as quickly as they did.
It's a fairy tale dream, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. What a Cinderella story the Saracens have turned out to be this year. And
speaking of salary violations,
exactly. Speaking of salary, that'll be wild. Yeah, I guess we got to get to that. The joys of recording a podcast and then taking a day to actually release it after. Right. Also, watched some rugby. Got around to seeing Top Gun Maverick finally. Ooh. Have you seen that yet, Stu?
Of course, I've seen it.
You've seen it? Oh man, it's like one of the best movies ever.
Yeah,
that was the vibe I got from it. How did you?
Well,
this is now Le Rouge Maverick this is going to be Top Gun Rugby for a minute. So,
they were.
Oh yeah, that's kind of exactly. I guess we can't probably avoid the spoilers for the movie though on the rugby podcast. But
so this is the thing. My best mate from the UK, John, he loves Tom Cruise, and Top Gun, the original Top Gun, is his favorite film of all time. So he was begging me to watch it because
I'm not sure if that makes me think that this friend of yours is the greatest person in the world or if I would hate him. I'm not.
Well, anyway, this is how it went down. So
I do love Top Gun.
So obviously the idea was when this was originally supposed to be released, it would have been at a time when both of us would have been in the UK, so we could have seen it together. Of course, COVID, like many other people's plans, prevented that from happening. So he saw it, and then I saw it in the cinema, and I said it is, a clear ad for the US Navy. It is a vanity project for Mr. Cruise. It shows the limit that actors have to go to put themselves through physical exhaustion to do their craft to a level that it is dangerous. And it is probably one of the best films I've ever seen. It is fantastic.
It's amazing. Just like every scene that had a plane in the air, I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen on a screen in my life. There was, something like just the cinematography of it, I thought was amazing.
Man, because the director behind it, he's worked with Tom Cruise before. He's done Oblivion, and
shot's amazing.
Yeah, and I've seen a behind the scenes video of how they had to do all the cockpit shots, and they said it took them 16 months just to get the camera rigs designed.
It's wild,
because you can't just put a standard film camera in an F-15 and just be good luck.
Cameras don't hold up to Mach 5 very well.
Yeah, but when you go through and you see this video of the training plan, which was designed by Tom Cruise because he's a registered pilot, not a F-15 pilot, but I guess he is now. Sensor aircraft pilot.
He did the flying in the movie.
He definitely did not, because can you imagine the insurance behind that if he
Google it
crashed the plane? No, he flew the sensor plane. He didn't fly the plane in the opening or the planes throughout the film. It's only the one in which the average Joe can get a commercial license from, not an actual.
All right.
So so
I'll suspend my belief for movie enjoyment though.
But if whilst any of our listeners or watchers are thinking of like, oh, what can I do between now and the MLR grand final? Then go watch Top Gun Maverick.
So to turn this back to rugby, do we need to start, because basically the movie of Top Gun, again, I'm not going to spoil the movie. It's the premise of both movies.
Yeah,
it's basically a pilot school.
Yes,
right, where you have a group of people training to become like the best pilots. So is there a missed opportunity that the Arrows Academy isn't called Top Gun?
Well, I'm going to say probably not, because Top Gun is for the US Navy, not the US Air Force, and also not Canadian.
But they're flying. I know it's the Navy. They're flying planes. It's the all right. You know what though? It may be though, because it's like we've all been all year. We should have last names on the backs of the jerseys. Maybe we have to have more fun. Maybe we should do call signs instead of let everybody throw nicknames on the back instead of.
Yeah, you can have Sammy the Boot.
The Boot on the back. There we go. Notorious DRB. That'd be that is cool on the back of a jersey.
I know that Ross's nickname apparently from the Arrows is Ross the Boss. So
Ross, yeah, just giant Q.
Yeah,
just a Q on it. That'd be cool. We can do what else do we got? Yeah, I don't know. We have to go through more Arrows nicknames to figure out more of these guys, but
okay, we'll figure that out in the off season.
Yeah.
Right. Let's move back into the real world and rugby. And before we get into the Eastern and Western Eliminators, it's time for a bit of an update regarding the disqualifications. So, first of all, there's been another disqualification since we last recorded, which was for the LA Gil-iminators. And similarly to the disqualification of Austin, there wasn't really a big statement or explanation why at the time when that happened. However, earlier or late last week, just before the Eliminators, MLR gave an official statement regarding the disqualification of Austin LA, and it is as follows. MLR previously announced the disqualification of the Austin Gilgronis and Los Angeles Gil-iminators from the 2022 MLR Championship Series. Austin's disqualification is due to the team management's failure to cooperate with an investigation conducted by the MLR League office concerning potential violations pertaining to player compensation. Los Angeles' disqualification is due to conduct deemed detrimental to the league, which warranted an immediate disqualification from the 2022 MLR Championship Series. And it's then followed up by a statement from the Commissioner, George Killebrew, stating, MLR is dedicated to protecting the integrity of rugby competition in North America and continuing a league-wide model that will grow for decades. While these penalties are disappointing to the fan bases, MLR ownership remains committed to maintaining the success of this league. Round 1 of MLR Championship Series begins this weekend, and we look forward to a hard-fought and entertaining postseason. So, not full details on what exactly happened, but the general ballpark regarding it. Austin's was due to lack of cooperation with a investigation pertaining to player compensation, and LA's was due to conduct deemed detrimental to the league, which, whilst being incredibly vague as what they are, seems to be like the appropriate legal language to use.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah, I think I think last week us on our podcast, and as well as you can tell, like a ton of people like across, social media and the internet, our big point that we were trying to get across last week was that just the disappointment that there was no explanation and stuff seemed to kind of be the the point that we were hitting, and that it seemed like a lot of people were also kind of resonating with across MLR fan bases. Throughout this week, I have, come to realize that, basically the announcements being worded like this is 100% being done based on legal advice being given to MLR right now. Which, as George Killebrew's own quote kind of points out, obviously the fan base, when he says disappointing to the fan bases, I kind of take that to mean not only just Austin and LA, but people that are just fans of the league as a whole, because it's obviously a very very unfortunate and kind of wild and crazy set of circumstances that are leading to this. And yeah, like it's just like, so obviously people are going to be disappointed and stuff, and like it's obviously a tough situation, and it seems to me like this is a young league right now that is trying to, for the first time in league history, they have like an actual, like, I guess should we call it a crisis, a PR situation?
I wouldn't call it a crisis. I say PR issue.
Yeah, like it's like the first like really big, I guess, I don't know, PR issue. I'm not even really sure I'm not sure what to call this. I don't know what word I'm searching for here. But it's like, it's the kind of like that first like real like the most like negative press thing that the league has ever had to deal with. Like, I mean, like a team folding, like the Colorado Raptors, whatever, it's gonna happen, right? In a young league. You look through the history of every major professional sports league on the planet, and there's teams that folded in the first couple of years. So this might just be one of those, it's reminders that it is a little bit of a new league, and that they may very well still be trying to figure out how they're going to appropriately handle this. And because of that, it seems like the legal advice that their lawyers are giving them is to, put out statements that are just kind of vaguely being like, yeah, you rule violations. And then this statement, the competition update that was released later this week after both Austin and LA were announced as being disqualified, is is also, kind of vague, but also offering more information, right? So now you kind of have a more narrow scope of what the league happened. And I mean, obviously the very clear thing from the post too is it's obviously, the two teams are owned by the same guy, right? Adam Gilchrist owns both of them. So there's an obvious connection between the two teams that, may possibly has led to the fact that they're being lumped together in this disqualification. Like it's really unfortunate for the leagues and stuff. And obviously, I mean, the other side of the argument too is it's like Austin and LA themselves are doing the exact same thing, right? Like they're not saying anything. You don't see any posts on social media and stuff. I think Austin had like one video about the players explaining some dog tag mantra thing that they made. But like both teams haven't really done much social media wise in the past couple of weeks. And if they have done any social media, it certainly hasn't been addressing this issue either. So it's kind of become clear over the past week that both sides are getting legal advice to not say too much. So I don't know. I guess it is obviously a very unfortunate situation. I think hopefully we can trust that hopefully the league's making the right call and the right move here. And I mean, it sucks. And I'm sure we'll find out the proper and full details at some point, because, somebody always talks at some point. So it's just kind of the way this works. But so hopefully we'll get some more. But yeah, I understand everybody's frustration with the vagueness of it, but I think it's and I was certainly frustrated last week with the vagueness of it, but now that I've had a week to kind of think about it and cool off, I'm kind of like, I don't know anything about being a lawyer, so I'm going to let the lawyers do the lawyer thing, and I'm sure we'll find out. I'm sure we'll find out the full extent soon.
Yeah, knowing our luck, the day after we record will be like
tomorrow. Yeah,
every party.
Yeah, exactly. Tomorrow.
So by the time you're listening to this, you'll already know everything that's been going on.
Just to let you know, George, we record generally on Mondays around 8:00 at night. So drop the news on Monday.
8 p.m. Eastern time. So
Eastern. So that's
like
when
midday Mountain time. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. Any other big news, even if it's not related to this, let's go Monday. It's not Tuesday. Tuesday's the worst day. At least if it's Wednesday, the podcast is out and we can be like, we got it out before the news. That's our excuse. Tuesday's the awkward day.
All right, so now let's talk about the Eliminators. And first up, we had the Eastern Eliminator. This was Rugby ATL versus Rugby New York at Silverbacks Park. And, you know, this seemed to be a game that was decided by penalty count more than anything. It's, you know, it was what New York had got. I think they led 6-0 before ATL got a penalty, and then finished halftime ATL 6, New York 9, and then immediately in the second half, New York then got
up to 9-0, 9-0 before ATL.
I was 9-0. I was being generous, but
yeah.
So yeah, 9-0, and then ATL clawed back 6-9. Then it was New York getting that penalty try, and then I believe it was 2 penalties for Atlanta. So, you know, closing the gap, getting close. And then who else for New York but Dylan Fawcett crossing over in the 73rd minute. You know, Emery Emery was on kicking duty as well. That was something that was like interesting to me.
Yeah, didn't really expect that. Eh? Has he been the main? I know he's like, I mean, obviously he has the kicking ability, but it was like I feel like most of the New York games I've watched this year have all been Heighton doing.
It's either been Heighton or Windsor doing the kicking, and then
well, like those two guys are usually never on the pitch at the same time.
Exactly. So it's normally one of the but Heighton started. Not Emery. So Windsor came on for the last 20 minutes or so. But yeah, it was Emery all game, and I mean, good, you know, excellent accuracy because he scored from every kick he had.
It was 5 for 5.
Yeah, 4 penalties, 1 conversion. The last penalty in the 79th minute was, you know, the final nail, so to speak. But Atlanta were of the mindset of may have lost the game, but it's not over yet, and so Coleman was able to get over in the red, like on the 82nd minute, and then converted his own try. And he scored all the points for Atlanta in that game. So all 19 from Coleman. So, you know, if he'd been on the winning side, maybe man of the match, but definitely man of the match for ATL fans.
I was going to say he's arguably man of the match, even though they lost.
Yeah. Well, this makes up for New York's loss to Rugby ATL last year in the Eastern Conference Final. So, and New York will be heading back to Veterans Memorial Stadium to see if they can do the double over New England. One, of course, the first team to beat New England at home, and we'll be trying again. But obviously, New England without bye week, it'll be interesting to see what happens from here.
So, in watching this game, what were your thoughts on the penalty try? And then, you know, however many minutes later it was, Atlanta finding themselves in a similar situation and Savetta just picking up a yellow card. And then Atlanta not being able to score after that either.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is that when a penalty try comes about, it's also
usually a yellow
card. But Atlanta didn't get a yellow card.
They didn't get a yellow card.
Also, if you look at the replay, it's clearly a try because the ball's being grounded on the line. So I'm not entirely sure what Mike Lash was going with, but you know, result probably the same. You know, we can argue about did the conversion would have hit it, but I mean, even if there hadn't been conversion, it would be 19-24, and its winner stays on at this point, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, I thought that was
I guess
confusing.
It's not so much the penalty try, but it was like when Atlanta kind of went back up the field, because there's that stretch around, like Savetta gets the yellow card, but there's that stretch where Atlanta goes back up, like up the field from like the 47th minute to probably like, I don't know, the 53rd, 54th or something, right? Where like Atlanta has New York pinned deep, and New York is just taking penalty after penalty after penalty.
Yeah.
Right. They get into a similar line out situation. New York takes 2 penalties. Savetta just gets sent off with a yellow, though.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, where it seems like, you know, previous situation on the other end of the field, they gave New York the penalty try, which is also kind of interesting. But I think like ultimately, like that moment in the game too, like that was a lot of time and effort on Rugby ATL's part to come away with 0 points.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, also shout out to the New York defense because they kept them off the board for that, even though they were taking a lot of penalties. But I mean, I think any team in the world would trade some penalties for keeping a team off the board in that situation.
It's very well, I'm sure New York fans will say that it was actually the correct decision. Atlanta fans will say it's the worst decision ever made.
Yeah, not exactly the most dynamic offensive game though.
Not really. No,
there was like Nahalo.
It seemed as though both teams were trying to avoid making errors, and so were being like, so instead of being a mistake on their half, it would be like a forced error. So it'd be ball carrier not releasing, and then that's a penalty. Or then it'd be, getting into the opposition 22, and then suddenly the ball gets knocked on in the ruck. So it seemed as though that neither one wanted to make a mistake, and in the end, they made too many mistakes. And
like it was kind of like, because I know when we were talking last week about this game, we were kind of like, I mean, we were like, New York loves playing wide, right? And then you look at the lineup that they put out, and you got Nahalo, Milner, Scudder, and Fido in your back three, right? And it's like, oh, of course, right. And then you obviously have Heighton, and Emery in like as your 10 to 12 combo, and it's like those are the exact type of guys that want to, play the ball wide and run it. But it seemed like Atlanta did a pretty decent job of like kind of, I guess, containing any New York attack that they wanted to run. Like only really like Nahalo had one really awesome run super early in the game, but then didn't really have much of anything. Milner Scudder had some good moments from fullback and stuff, some nice kicks, did well, like, under the high ball and stuff, fielding some of that pressure. Same with Fido. I thought Fido, like, I'm not saying like those guys didn't like play well or anything, but it was just like they didn't really get the opportunities that I was, I guess, expecting them to get in this game, which I think is probably a credit to the Atlanta defense as well. That like a lot of those guys were shut down, and this ended up being just a kind of a battle in the packs a lot of the times, right? Obviously, both of New York's tries, they came from the maul. And as you kind of said, Stu, a little bit of a seemed like the team that took more penalties ended up losing this one, right? And as those mauls were kind of set up by Rugby ATL penalties. So I guess that's kind of like this, like a little bit of the story of the game. So obviously, a handful of Canadians in this matchup as well with so you had Matt Heaton obviously captaining Atlanta. George Barton went unused. Unfortunately, Keys didn't play at all. And on the other side, Andrew Cole came in for the last 12 minutes. He replaced Nahalo. Heaton, I thought Heaton played really well. Barton obviously didn't play. And Cole's, I think, has been great all year, but 12 minutes, so it didn't really leave a super identifiable mark on the game, but solid for his 12 minutes, and get a little Boston New York rivalry for the East Final, which I'm sure will be a blast.
Absolutely. Well, we go from one side of the United States to the other as we move now to the Western Eliminator, and this was a bit more boisterous, a bit more argy-bargy, a little bit more action going on instead of the methodical game of Atlanta, New York. This was score fest here, there, and everywhere, and started off with Nate Osberger getting a try within the second minute to get San Diego on the board. But seems to be that the man of the weekend, Adrian Alatimu, just phenomenal all game. Gets a penalty in the 7th minute, Matenga gets the first try for Seattle in the 11th, and Alatimu gets a conversion. He gets a conversion for 3 of the tries because one scored by Canadian Travis Larson was done under posts, and as we all know in MLR, if you score under the post, it's automatic 7. And a total of 5. So 5 penalties and 3 conversions for Alatimu. So that is, really fantastic for them. It seemed to be like after that try from Matenga, it was all Seattle, and like to San Diego just weren't able to get back into the game at all. I mean, right until like the 77th minute, San Diego didn't score at all in the second half. And and obviously that try in the 77th minute was scored by another Canadian, Jason Higgins, able to get across and add to his impressive tally from the 22 season for San Diego as well. And when we were obviously doing our predictions last week, we're like, oh, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Houston or is it going to be Seattle? Only to find that they were not playing Houston and when they were playing the game in Seattle. Yeah. I think San Diego has just been like messed around with all these eliminations. So it starts off with Austin have been eliminated. Oh, so you may be able to get into the playoffs depending on how Seattle goes. So don't pack your bags just there. And then it's like, okay, Seattle got what they need to do. So continue packing your bags, booking those flights. And then on the Tuesday, it's like, actually, guys, turns out another team has been disqualified.
Well, I agree. Like I genuinely, like, I wonder how much that did kind of mess with San Diego a little bit, like being like, oh, we're out of the playoffs, we're back in the playoffs, we're out of the playoffs, we're back in the playoffs. Kind of over the course of the week. Like I'm assuming the players on the other teams all found out before media releases and stuff anyways. But like, we don't know. So I guess we can use the media releases, the timeline, but like, yeah, I do wonder how much that I would love to talk to a Legion player just to be like what the past week was like for them going into this game. Because it's not only that, like, when they see like the Austins disqualified, right, and there's still like a week left, but it's like the way the schedule worked is or San Diego had the bye week in the last week of the season, right? Yeah. So it's like you're finishing round 17 looking at the schedule being like, oh, like we're eliminated. So it's like, you kind of like, oh, you can maybe like hang out with the boys, do some like end of the year party stuff, right? And it's like, how much do you check out, then realize, oh, we have a chance, see that Seattle beat LA, kind of do you check back out again? Then a couple of days later, you find out that you're still in anyways and have to fly. Like, I wonder how much that flip-flopping, how much of a mental toll that might have taken on like the players. Cause like, I mean, everybody's human, right? And it's almost feels like it almost feels like if you found out that like you just finished your last exam at school and then you went out, you probably like go out and party. And then like 3 days later, a professor's like, oh, hey, you guys got one more exam actually. Yeah. Right. And you'd all be like, oh, well, this is probably not going to go too well. But Canadians though, in this game, huge impact. Or should we talk about AJ Alatimu first? I mean, you already kind of touched on him.
Well, yeah, as in he was the player of the round. Absolutely.
But it's like, obviously for Alatimu, it's like, it's not just like the accuracy. Dude, that 50-22 or that 50-22 that set up Matenga's try, the opening try for Seattle, was nasty.
Yeah, that was amazing to watch.
Yeah, like I'm
as a neutral. Not
as a neutral fan, I was like, that
fan.
Kick. That is the exact play that I'm like, dude, the 50-22 rule, like how have we gone 150 years of playing rugby without using this rule?
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's crazy. It's such a good rule. Opens up so much like attacking options and stuff. And when you have guys that are like as skilled as Alatimu, like that was beautiful. And then obviously like the pass to Duncan Matthews for that try too, like just across the pitch, completely cut, like, I think he cut across 3 different Seawolves to get it to Matthews. I think Matthews was the 4th guy or something. Yeah. So that try was unreal too. So yeah, Alatimu, player of the week in all reality from this game. from the Eliminator round. Canadians, though, in this game, big impact, impact across the board. You mentioned that Larson and Higgins both had tries.
Yeah.
But also too, like Mike Smith was amazing.
Oh, well, I mean, are we surprised?
Really? No, we're not surprised.
Yeah. I mean, and that's if it hadn't been for Tamilau, it would have been a try for
Mike Smith. Yeah,
Mike Smith.
Because Smith had
so close
the run that set up that try.
Yeah.
He had the run that set up Tamalau's try. He had another run later in the game that got San Diego down to like within 5 meters too. It seemed like every time he touched the ball, he was like behind Seattle's defense somehow, but he hit every ruck. He was doing well to win the rucks. He was making his tackles where he needed to. I thought he just had a phenomenal game. He's been so good this year. Kingsley Jones, buddy, have fun picking the back row when you guys play the test this year. So he was insane. Larson on the other side, always fun seeing Canadian guys go head to head at the same position, right? So, maybe Smith probably played a little bit better, like during, as far as his overall game, but Larson got gets his name up in the lights, the big impact, scoring what is ultimately probably the try that buries San Diego in this game before Jason Higgins too had that was a sweet try as well.
Talking about offloads leading up to Matthew Try, but prior to Higgins was just beautiful, and then Higgins going over. I mean,
my gosh, that was an unreal offload. What a fun game for the Western Eliminator. Was a fun game at the very least, and Seattle one win away from a third MLR final.
Yeah, it's kind of very impressive to say.
I was gonna say it is. It's weird being like, should they be in the? They probably wouldn't be in the playoffs, but now that they are, it's like, could Seattle win a third one? All you got to do is beat Houston, and then it's one game, right? Like.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about Seattle is like, if they ever make the playoffs, don't count them out, because
Seattle, like the 2 years that Seattle won, like they were never the best team in the league. They won when it mattered to win.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
And I'm not saying that to like disparage Seattle and being like, it's just they were like in both years it was they did what they had to do at the business end of the season and got it done, right? Like that's why you play playoffs. But I wonder, like, if that's going to be a super fun hypothetical conversation that we'll have to have on the podcast, is how do you look at like if Seattle does end up winning the Shield and they'll have 3 out of the 4 Shields, but you're also going to so you'd be like, oh, like how great is this little, like, I think Dynasty needs to be reserved for teams that have won 3 in a row, but like what a run Seattle's had. But then you could be like, they wouldn't have even made the playoffs if Austin and LA didn't break some rules here. So it's
I know it's
like it's all wild, right? So it's that'll be an interesting conversation that we might have to have in a couple of weeks. How this affects the Seawolves legacy if they end up winning, but one game at a time, I guess.
One game at a time, and I think that's how Seattle have always played it when it comes to playoff games. Has always been focus on the opponent in front of you, and then you can focus on the other guys next week. But as it currently stands, because again we're recording this on Monday the 13th of June, so
no, I think we're safe, and nobody else is getting DQ'd. I think we're safe.
Okay,
I think we're safe at this point.
That's the thing. You think, we don't know. And either way,
Toronto NOLA East Final next week.
Okay, so the current setup will be the Western Conference Final will be held on Saturday, and that will be Houston versus Seattle. And on Sunday, it will be the Eastern Conference Final, which is New England versus New York. And now we move away from American rugby to New Zealand, where we have the second round of the Pacific 4 series. And if you stayed up to watch the game between Canada and New Zealand, We were hoping this could be like a close battle and, maybe even be like the game of the tournament. And if you're an Black Ferns fan, maybe it was. If you're a Canadian fan, not so much. There's no real way to sugarcoat it. It was a shutout win for the Black Ferns in Auckland. I mean, the halftime score was only 6-0. So, a little bit of hope. And there had been some indiscipline within the New Zealand squad with a yellow card at the 30th minute. So the final 10 minutes, maybe there could have been something. Unfortunately, the Black Ferns defense is just, it was just far too good in that game. It was,
New Zealand's good at rugby still? Is that where we're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a nation where children are told like the rules of rugby and it's been, basically indoctrinated into you since as soon as you could stand and catch and throw, you may be good at rugby. Who knew? Yeah. But this is I'll get onto what I think about the whole situation in a bit from a different angle, but obviously having that level of experience, I think the Black Ferns had also been somewhat embarrassed in the autumn, those losses against England and then followed up loss to France, being basically whitewashed for the autumn season. This was a statement. Like they'd played Australia the week previously and the way to turn it around, but this is probably like the game that they were focusing on the most. And they knew what they needed to do. They knew what would get the job done. They put themselves in a position now where Canada needs to not only win but score a huge amount of points in order to even possibly be considered first, and that's even before the Black Ferns play again. So this may have been the game that has won the series for New Zealand. Yeah. But something else I want to mention as well is that this is the first year of New Zealand having the women's version of Super Rugby. So this is the first time in which these players that are based in New Zealand are having, professional contracts, full-time commitments to games. And, we've seen it not only with New Zealand, we've seen it in the Women's Six Nations as well. England, obviously untouchable at the moment with their women's team. But if you look at the teams that finished in, how they finished in that table, the top 3 teams all have a level of professional contracts at the moment. And, obviously the situation in Canada is different because a lot of Canadian players currently also play in like Premier 15s over in England, but it should now be an argument, and it can probably be something that will be coming up after the World Cup this fall, and in time for the 2025 World Cup in England when there's more teams and like more opportunities. But is this now the time where you can say, we can't put this off any longer? We need to ensure that our women's national team is at a professional level, and that means we're paying them professional amounts. I know this is continuing to open the can of worms that has come out since like the high performance review, but even an idea of like saying, okay, these are the players that are going to Premier 15s, they're going to stay there for the entire season and get paid that amount, and we'll also have them on like retainer contracts as well. So we pay them like a little dividend whilst they're over there, but all our other players that say aren't being picked up, because there is also talk of the Premier 15s capping the number of foreign players in that league. So we have to say, okay,
that's gonna happen.
Probably not, but again, it's out of our hands, and you want to prepare for all eventualities. So you need to say, we need to have a core team. They can either be based in Langford, they can be based in Ontario somewhere, and be like, we are going to pay this team to train, to prepare, and and obviously,
are you saying like you want them paid more? Because it's like they are paid.
Well, from what I've gathered is that they're paid, but it's not enough.
Okay, so you're saying paid more.
So yeah, paid more, but also, that professional structure put in place. Maybe this could also be an argument to help I don't know if professionalize is a word, but it's something
It's definitely a word.
So to professionalize the women's structure, or like the top league of women's rugby in the USA and North America, and give more play, because this is something, because obviously, as not even as the World Cup continues, it's as Premier 4 series continues, as the WXV series begins next year as well. Like, the nations that are going to be competing at the top are going to have players that are in a professional environment. And if you are not doing that, you're going to be left behind. You're going to have Canada falling into the second round of the WXV. You're going to have them, fall further and further down the world rankings, like has happened with the men's team. So
I think the situations are a little bit different though from the women's teams to the men's team, right? Like, I think like if you kind of look at, as you mentioned, like the Premier 15s, which is probably the best women's league in the world right now, right? That's tons of Canadians, tons of Americans in that league.
Yeah.
Right. And you kind of even look at the way the final played out, tons of Canadians, tons of Americans in the league, and they're like the best players on some of their teams too.
Oh, absolutely. But this is, right. So my cause of concern is you don't want to be at the mercy of a rule change that you don't have a say in.
No,
could that may be the case? Because New Zealand women, the Black Ferns, they're now getting professional contracts as well, and soon they may be challenging England for wins and stuff, and because they've won. What was it like? They've won the majority of the women's World Cup finals. So maybe it's also now the idea of and I'm saying like years down the line. I'm not saying, next week they're going to decide this. I'm saying that after 2025, and maybe England say like, right, only two international players, Premier 15 side.
I really don't think they're going to do that though, man. Like, I think that's a good way to just kill a lot of interest in the league too, right? Especially global interest. So like I don't think they're gonna do that. I think players from all over the world, I think especially like Premier 15s has a really good opportunity to be like, if you want to, you can be like the best women's rugby competition in the world and have that like almost like, because rugby in men's rugby, it's kind of set up where it's like, if you're from New Zealand, you're gonna play in New Zealand. If you're from Australia, you play for an Aussie team. If you're from England, you're going to play in the Premiership. If you're from South Africa, you go wherever you want. But a lot of people kind of stay localized. Whereas I think like the Premier 15s might have a little opportunity to be like a women's rugby equivalent to like, Major League Baseball or the NHL or something, where it's like the best players from all over the world can come together for like one elite level league. Which I think would be good. My biggest one of my concerns too, and it's like obviously I want to see like women's rugby continue to develop and stuff, especially in this country though. Like, this country can barely get a pro women's hockey league off the ground, right? Like,
yeah,
and that's the biggest sport in our country, and we can like, as far as like people willing to put up money to like support it. It's like women's hockey is probably the most popular women's sport in our country, and that for a multitude of reasons has struggled immensely to get any sort of league off the ground. It's just been a ton of infighting between a bunch of involved parties, and but I think ultimately it's obviously, it's like a fascinating conversation, I guess, to have, because it's like you always kind of want to keep an eye on how to develop the women's game. But I also like, just like, are we having this conversation because you're panicking that they lost 28-0 to New Zealand? Or are we?
I'm having this conversation because I don't want to be in a position like years or even decades down the line where you could say, this is the point where you should have been doing something. And now Canada kicked out of the Women's World Cup qualifications.
I mean, how old is Premier 15s right now?
I think it's like about 5 years.
So like the first, so is Premier 15s the first?
Hang on. Let me just have a quick check, and then I can just make sure I'm not talking out my backside. Yeah, so it was founded. It was founded in 2016, but the first season was 2017.
So is that the first time that any of those women have been paid to play club rugby?
I'm just looking into it. So the thing is what I'm referring to is that England rugby pay their women's 15s team on top of what is going on with like Premier 15s or whatever.
Yeah, so like Rugby Canada pays the women's 15s team.
Yeah,
like, but they get paid.
It's also I can't find the numbers of it as well. I know they get paid, but we also have players that haven't. Well, I mean, it's the same with like MLR as well. Like players also have other jobs as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, they all have other. Or like a lot of the MLR players and stuff. But even at that, like the MLR players, you'd be getting are probably getting an MLR paycheck, a Rugby Canada paycheck, and then whatever else they're choosing to do.
But again, this is why I'm trying to like future proof this whole understanding of just if you can get these women paid at a rate in which that they maybe don't need to take a second job, that they can be focused on training and focused on recovery, like outside of games. There's also university competitions and like club competition, community competition that they can be doing throughout the year to give themselves a bit more game time, so that when it does come to internationals and test level, they can put their rubber stamp on it the same way that England is doing in like the Six Nations and any other women's team on the world at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you have to continue to invest in women's game, and I hope Rugby Canada continues to see that. Yeah, the women's 15s team, like if they beat New Zealand, they would have moved to like second in the world.
Yeah,
like they had a chance to leapfrog New Zealand in the standings here, right? So like, and unfortunately, the game didn't work out, but like. Yeah, like I think that's the kind of the biggest difference is like the actual landscape of women's rugby, I think to me is different than men's rugby. So I think like worrying about sliding down the standings, I don't really think that that's necessarily there at this point in time, because it's like it's a top 3 team in the world. Even like, and given the current state, like you said, like there's maybe more of a women's rugby infrastructure in New Zealand. Premier 15s has taken off. There's a lot of Canadian and a lot of American players playing in Premier 15s.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I think like women's rugby from a professional standpoint is globally is starting to take off. Right. Yeah. It's like, this is kind of like the women's rugby 1995 right now.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, we're just hitting professionalism. Yeah. And for that, you know what I mean? So it's like now that you have like Premier 15s, you have some leagues in the Southern Hemisphere, right? But like I said, it's like the biggest difference I think is that the Canadian players are good enough to go play in those leagues, right? Whereas it's like there's not necessarily a whole lot of Canadian men players that are good enough to play in the Premiership, or that are good enough to play top 14 or URC or Super Rugby. Right. So it's harder for the men to kind of get to those best leagues, but all the women can get to the best leagues. So I think you're going to see like a lot of like the women's players, the Canadian women's players are going to be in those massive full-time professional environments. It's just that the environment might be in England at like the Saracens or Exeter or something, as opposed to in Langford. But they're still going to get those full-time professional environments because the Canadian women are good enough to hang with the best players in the world, all over the world. That's I guess my thought on that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You want to act now whilst you can, whilst there's something there. And that's the thing is that obviously the United States is going to be hosting the Women's World Cup in
so hopefully that's
years.
A big bump.
Yeah, so that's why I mean, as in like this is a time where you get like WPL, you get that going. You can see like, maybe possible expansion, in the same level that like MLR is doing at the moment. And it's work that needs to be done and things that can be done, and all things that it's the idea of like, yes, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be, road bumps along the way. There's going to be challenges that need to be overcome, but it's going to be significantly easier to do this now than when you're like chasing behind like the other teams that have already done it ahead of you.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing though too is like knowing that the World Cup is at the end of this year, how big of a bump it'll be for women's rugby in our country if Canada wins it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, as much as, because like you kind of see what happened to like rugby or Canadian soccer, girls' participation in soccer after like the women's team won the Olympics.
Yeah.
And some other big tournaments, and like the success that Christine Sinclair and that squad's been having, right? It's like been a huge bump for women's soccer in this country, right? And it's like if Canada wins the World Cup, even if the United States wins the World Cup, right? Like that's going to be an absolutely massive bump. But that in order to do that, got to figure out how to get past New Zealand and England. And obviously a first difficult test with New Zealand. I thought Canada played like pretty well in the first half. It was a tight game, though. New Zealand only had a couple penalties to show for it. Fortunately, in the second half, Ruby Tui decided to take over the game, scoring 2 tries and having a handful of other unreal runs. That one try that she scored, little chip kick, was phenomenal. Bit of skill. The Black Ferns social media has a little bit of a really cool video of her practicing that the couple days before the game too. So I guess practice makes perfect, kids. Try things in practice, because you never know when it's going to work how it's going to play out in the game. So the chip kick over the top kind of worked out for her. And yeah, as you said, Black Ferns, New Zealand, they're good at rugby. Canada's it's a good game, because it's like, hey, it's still some work to be done before the World Cup, right? If you want to, because Canada, even as the 3rd ranked team in the world, you definitely have a shot at winning it, but still a little work to be done in order to knock off New Zealand and England. And obviously the World Cup being held in New Zealand, like if you're going to beat the Black Ferns, you got to do it on home soil, right? Which, as they kind of proved this past week, is a difficult
easier
task.
said than done. Yeah. But it's not the end of the Pacific 4 series just yet. We have this weekend coming up. It is Canada versus Australia and the USA versus New Zealand, one after the other. And first place may be just beyond Canada's reach, but following the USA's victory over Australia, which was narrowly 16-14, a victory for Canada will be able to grant them the final place of 2nd in the table, which, nothing to be turn your nose up at.
Do you like the new USA kit?
No.
Yeah. Like,
actually, no. Hang on. Let me be fair, because it's really this is the first time they've worn it. So it may be one that just grows on me.
I like, the thing is, it's like watching, because it's like, I think like the women's team are the first team that's like actually worn it like in game. It looks like they're wearing like a t-shirt under like a basketball jersey, or whatever. Like the way the arms are, like the stripes on the arms are cut, like it looks like, and then like the stripes don't go all the way to the back either, so like the back is just plain white. I don't know, not a fan, really not. I don't know. I feel like I like, the thing that stinks for all Eagles jerseys now is like there's literally an MLR team that wears a better Eagles jersey than you. So you know what I mean? Like that's what you have to contend with. It's like I'm comparing every jersey to Old Glory because they have a better USA national team jersey than you do.
Well, back to the drawing board. I mean, it's not as though there's a World Cup coming up this year or anything.
No.
Never mind. We return to Canada because we've got a bit of news that's come out. Gaston Mirez has posted on his Instagram account saying, thanking the Arrows for the journey. And it appears to be the case that Gaston Mirez, the Arrows' top try scorer, will be leaving the team now that the season has concluded. It should be worth noting that last year during the Uruguayan qualification journey, Ignacio Chans, a Uruguayan rugby journalist, interviewed Gaston Mirez, and he said that he has signed a contract for the Arrows for 1 year, which was the season we've just had, and that he will then decide where to go from there. And of course, just mentioned about the Uruguayan qualifications. They've qualified for the Rugby World Cup, and Mirez was a pivotal player in that squad to get the scores to help get Uruguay to qualify as America's one for the first time ever. So, well, to be honest, any which way he goes, I hope he can be part of the team that goes to France for the Rugby World Cup next year, because I'll definitely be cheering him on. So, and you never know, this might be the end of Mirez's Arrows journey for now. He may obviously come back if he feels that he still has it in him. But if this is where he wants to end it, and just got to say, top try scorer, even announced today a statistic of beaten 50 defenders, one of the first players to do so for the Arrows. So, he'll always be an Arrow to us, but gracias, Gaston. We will definitely miss you back in Toronto.
It can't be a coincidence that the guy that's got the most defenders beaten also has the most tries, right? Like, it feels like those two stats might kind of, maybe not necessarily go hand in hand, but they'd be pretty close to tied together.
Yeah. I mean,
unless you're like Dylan,
one certainly helps, but yeah. So that's all we've really got. We did post about it on Twitter, and Gaston did reach out to reply to us and say, thanks guys, on our decision of we hope he'll be appearing for Uruguay in 2023, and then we'll be cheering him on regardless. So, but speaking of international rugby, and we're talking about national bodies, as Rugby Canada have announced that their tickets for their men's 15s game against Belgium and their women's game against Wales both will be held at the Wanderers ground, not at the same time, obviously. And it's also been, so Rugby Canada have also announced that women's age grade rugby is set to return. They've said that under 18 is set to return in late 2022. And under 20s and under 23s women's rugby is to return in 2023. And the reason why that's happening so late is because they are doing the recruitment drive now to get coaches, team managers, all the relevant backroom staff in place so that they can have these under 20s and under 23 tournaments and the right people be needed where they are. So, we've been talking about the future of Canadian rugby and what they need to do. Obviously, the return of age grade rugby and women's pathway of where they can go on the international level. Great to hear, especially after it's been delayed the past 2 or 3 years due to COVID. So, all going in the right direction, in my opinion.
There you go. Well, that ties back into what you were talking about earlier, right? It's the invest in the. Invest
in the women, and the sport will grow. That's my opinion on that. Yeah. Okay, so if you are looking for any rugby this weekend, it is a weekend of finals from what we gather on Sportsnet. You can watch the Premiership final. That will be between the Leicester Tigers and Saracens. And you can also watch the United Rugby Championship final, and that will be between the Stormers and the Bulls. On TSN, you have the Super Rugby Pacific final, which will be between the Blues and the Crusaders. And you also have the final round of the Pacific 4 series, which will be on the TSN app and tsn.ca. And of course, the MLR Championship series with the Eastern Conference and Western Conference finals will be on the Rugby Network to all us lovely Canadians. But now we get into our predictions for the conference finals. And hopefully this time the teams stay the same, because I picked Houston and then found out the next day that Houston weren't playing. So
hey, Houston got through. You kind of count. Also, I picked Seattle. Seattle got through. We're playing. So we were both right, in my opinion.
Okay, so now that we have the actual fixture this time around, are you gonna stick with your decision of Seattle, or are you gonna change it up?
Wow. Yeah, I guess I picked Seattle last week to beat Houston. So yeah, you know what? I guess for the sake of consistency, I'll back Travis Larson and AJ Alatimu to put up a big number on Houston. And sorry Robbie Povey. I think you're going home. I do still love the playoff shirts though.
Yeah, I don't know what you're saying, man. I'm backing Robbie Povey all the way, and also the Springboks. I mean, Sabercats.
Saberbox.
Saberbox. That's it.
The Spring Cats. Saberbox sounds way cool.
Saberbox does sound
Saberbox, yeah.
I think we can argue this for Seattle as well, but I think Houston is the most improved side in MLR this season. And they've also had the bye week as well, so they have.
Are you the most improved if you're completely different from last year?
Yes.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, they had that Springbok embroidered on as well.
Exactly.
All that.
It'd be hilarious. They should wear They should have a Springbok alternate jersey.
That alternate jersey next year is just green.
It's green. That would be amazing, actually.
Yeah. Just like, need to, we know. What are you gonna do about it?
Take the logo, the cat's head, and make a leaping saber cat on the side or something. Yeah. Oh man, we could do this. This could be good.
Yeah. Well, that will be the Western Conference. So Derek going for Seattle. I'm going for Houston. The Eastern Conference final. It is New England versus New York, and this will be.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, because. I think not to say that New England didn't care, but also when they played New York in the final game of the regular season, New England had already secured the Eastern Conference final, so they didn't need to do a full team, a first 15 team out and risk any injuries or things like that. New York knew that they needed to win to try and get a home eliminator. Unfortunately, Atlanta was able to do that instead, but it worked out in New York's favor. But I think New England have seen that there have been cracks in their fortress, and they're like, nope, that was a one-time thing. It's not happening again. Yeah. I'm personally going to go with New England.
Ooh. So here's the fun thing with this matchup. Is obviously in American sports, Boston, New York is the biggest rivalry in every city.
Hang on. Is this gonna somehow relate to the Bruins by any chance?
No, not at all. No.
Oh, really? Because
I'm not gonna bring up the Bruins. Why would I bring up the Bruins?
Were you about to say you hate the Bruins?
I do hate the Bruins. Who doesn't hate the Bruins?
And you hate any team that's within a certain radius of where the Bruins play, which would include.
No, I hate the Bruins and I hate Tom Brady. That's it. I have nothing against the Celtics. The Celtics exist. I guess they're in the NBA Finals. Good for them. I got nothing. Yeah, I got nothing against the Celtics. What else do they have there? Oh, the Red Sox. Yeah, the Red Sox suck too. Either way though. So the interesting thing with this matchup though, New York only lost one game on the road all year. New England's only lost one game at home all year. Obviously, there's a little bit of intersection with that stat because New England's one loss at home is New York. So you got probably the best road team in the league playing the best home team in the league in the best home team in the league's home. So that's a fascinating matchup to begin with. I think New York, to me, just they like playing on the road a little too much because I think it actually fits their style of play a lot more. I think if this game was in New York, I would pick New England, but because it's in New England, I think I'm going to go back and pick New York to beat New England at home again.
Right then. Okay, so those are Derek's picks, and those are my picks for the conference finals. But if you are looking for the Toonies picks,
do you want to go a little bit further? Because now you got your final. You want to call your final 2 weeks in advance, see if you get it. A little bit of a bonus pick.
I mean, we have to. So you say that the final is going to be Seattle, New York.
Yeah, so that's our final. That's my final right now.
And I'd say that the final is going to be Houston, New England. Are you saying who's going to win?
Yeah, who's going to win the final? Call it. We have it. We have
you call it first. So Seattle, New York.
So I'm going to go
back at JFK Stadium.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the thing with New York, is I think New York would lose at home.
So Seattle will get their third.
So I'm thinking Seattle might have seen the door open to get their third title.
All right.
So that's my early MLR championship call.
Okay, so I say it'll be Houston, New England in the final, and that means it will be hosted in New England. And as you mentioned, New England best home team in the league, so I say that New England would be the new MLR champions.
I completely agree with you if it ends up being Houston, New England as a final. I would completely agree with that pick. That's going to be a tough night for Houston.
Yeah. Well, those are conference finals and I suppose MLR final picks for this round. We'll come back next week and tell you how accurate or inaccurate we were. But if you're looking for the Toonies picks, you can find them on our TikTok account at the Rouge Rugby. In fact, you can find us across all social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Rouge Rugby. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can find more on Spotify, Anchor FM, and Apple Podcasts. And if you like watching our beautiful faces, you can do so on our YouTube channel, again, at the Rouge Rugby, where we also include some clips, which include interviews from the players of the Arrows during the season. Derek, if the people want to find you online, where can they do so?
At Reset the Jet across all social media platforms.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, Derek, that's another week of rugby and the Rouge Rugby under our belts. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. We hope you can join us again next time.